Hello everybody, I'm Damien Leroy. I'm with Efoil, and I just want to say welcome to the family. We're excited to have you as an affiliate. I'm going to break it down, give you as much information as I can to keep it as safe as possible and give your customer the best experience they can have. First things first, we always recommend obviously insurance. We want to make sure everybody's safe and operating safely out there. Saying that, we want to make sure your area, speak with your local marine patrol and authorities and make sure that you're running your process with these electric units properly in those intercoastals or waterways or lakes, whatever it may be. It's very important to know what your rules and regulations are. Let's talk about location safety. We want to make sure that we know all hazards, all water depth, whether there's ropes or buoys or anything underwater. It's very important to know your location, where you're teaching, where other boat traffic, other people. It's very important to know your surroundings, know your location, make sure your student knows their location and what to look out for and what are the limits and where they can go. You always want to have a helmet, a life vest, a Coast Guard approved life vest, a whistle. We want to make sure that you have booties. You can obviously have full wetsuits so that when they're going from climbing up on the board or to their knees, that they're not rubbing their knees. All these are great precautions or great things to have to make sure that the customer has, one, the greatest experience, and two, keeping them as safe as possible. First things first, we're going to start with a ground lesson. Then we're going to start with laying down on the board. Then we're going to start with riding on your knees. Then we're going to go to slowly standing up. Slowly, key being the word, slowly standing up. The next step is touch and goes. The next step is longer touch and goes or fully foiling. We like to teach one-on-one. One-on-one just makes it very, one, personal for the customer. Two, it's a very good way to learn properly. They seem to take off it very well because they can see you and what you're doing and how to learn from it. So it's a good way of teaching. It also it's more personal. Spend some time on the land with them. Really learn about them. Learn their positions. They can literally pop up 200 times on the land before they go to the water. It's going to really help with the water lesson. So I suggest going over everything on land, making the water very easy and very efficient. So when I first start a ground lesson with a customer, it's very important I right away get them going, get them all the information with what we have right here with remotes. Are they righty or lefty? Get them in their proper hands. And then what I do is I lay them down. I usually use a towel because that simulates the actual deck pad, but I'll use this board right now because it's the most easiest way to do it. So let's start a lesson. So you're going to start your lesson by explaining to your customer that it's very important that when you get in the water, you're not kicking around here, and because you have the unit underneath, so we don't want them to bump into anything or kick anything. So it's very important that they know when they start a lesson that they want to be aware of what's underneath it. It's very important that they are aware. The other important one is you flip the remote around to your back of your hand just in the beginning of the lesson, because when they climb on the board, they climb on like this and they lay down, and that's how you start a lesson. Now what happens is, the reason we do this is, one, the remote's always off, then I can turn the remote around and I can turn it on. And the reason we do this at the very beginning of the lesson is so they don't climb on and grab that trigger accidentally by bumping it and this thing take off and run. So we want to make sure we start nice and safe. Once they kind of understand how twitchy it is, that can change during the lesson. But when you first start in the water, it's always a good thing to have them having their remote backwards. The next step is, I'm right-handed, so we'll say this student's right-handed at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to ride laying down. Now if I'm riding like this, and I just slowly start idling along with my instructor right next to me, you're going to tell your student to put their opposite hand on the center of the board. This kind of gives them the ability to, one, scoot forward or scoot backwards depending on whatever they would need, whether the board's up or down, just flat planing on the surface. And then what we're going to do is we just ride around and get comfortable with the throttle. We're not trying to do anything but get used to the throttle. So I would be right next to the customer, and all we're gonna do is ride till we get the board up and planing. So both of us are up to speed where the board's nice and flat. We're cruising along, we're getting used to the trigger, we're understanding how this works. Now, most important part is now we go through with the student letting off and noticing how the board goes forward, goes forward, goes forward, and you start to learn that, ooh, this trigger is a little twitchy. And so what it does for them is they learn and feel, okay, we definitely want to be very steady with the trigger. Also, we want them to get comfortable with letting their hand off the trigger. It's very important to let your hand off the trigger when something goes wrong. So on the ground lesson, what we're going to do next is they're going to get comfortable like this, and they're going to feel what it's like to lay on the board. Now the next step is they're going to go to their knees. So a perfect example of somebody will be like this. They're going to go like this, and they're going to be like this, and now they're on their knees. But if you look at my position on the board, that board is going to go straight up into there because I am really far back on this board. So what you actually want people to do, one, you don't want them to use this hand, because if they're pushing down on this, they could bump that trigger. So it's kind of important that you have the people take their front hand, they put their one hand dead center in the front, keeping that nose down, because weight forward is very safe. When they push down on this, they can slowly bring their knees closer to the front. And now I have this hand just like this, and all that's doing is just making sure I don't hit the trigger. So once I get up onto my knees, now I can keep that weight on the front and keep my pressure on the front, keeping the nose down. If I go back with this weight, that board's gonna launch up. So you wanna really watch them and make sure their weight is forward. A good position to know is that their knees are more towards the top of this pad. Obviously, if they go too far forward, the nose is gonna go under, so you just have them scoot a little further back. Most importantly is that the weight is forward, not saying the nose is underwater, but the weight is forward. So from this step, you would ride around with them on their knees, and then you would slowly transition into moving their knees up if needed to slowly get to the point where they're riding around on their knees, getting comfortable with tilting right or left, and just learning the remote and learning how much, what happens when I let off. So they're just riding around getting comfortable on their knees. The next step would be standing up. Now, 99% of the people are going to do exactly this right here. That's what they do. They stand up super fast and they crash. There's no rush to standing up. So what we want to teach people is you put your hand down, you want your front foot to go on the front part of this deck pad. So let me take my shoes off. So when we have our knees, we're like this. So when I stand up, their front foot is going to be more towards the front of the deck pad. Now what I'm looking for in my student is if my student stands up like this, he went back foot, then he went up, that means that board's going to rocket vertical and he's definitely going to crash. The weight has to be over the front. So when they stand up, what you're looking for is you want them to go from knees. I have that front weight forward. They put their front foot here. They take everything slowly and they keep their weight forward and they slowly come up. They don't even need to stand super tall. They can just slowly ride like this. They can put their knee down and get comfortable with riding like this. Everybody's going to be different. You may run into some people that literally don't have the strength in this leg to push up. So they can put this hand right here and slowly push up, but their weight is forward. Forward is safe. When I go back, the board comes up. We always want the nose down. If I keep my weight forward and I move my back foot to more center, that keeps all the weight forward on this foil, keeping everything down, keeping the foil from flying. Now, all this is happening with a steady trigger, literally steady trigger. I'm not adjusting my speed with the trigger. It is all, I get up to a certain speed, nice, fast, planing speed, and that's when I go from laying down, I go from laying down, I slowly bring my knees up, keeping my weight forward. Keeping my weight forward, I adjust my knees forward, slowly come up to riding, getting comfortable. I feel good, nice and steady, nothing's changed with the trigger. Then I slowly put that weight down so I can get my front foot up. I slowly keep my weight forward and I slowly come up, and then all of a sudden I'm riding on the board. Now I'm not trying to foil, I'm just riding on the board. My weight is forward, I can slowly move this foot forward, which makes it easier to stand. I'm nice and steady, I'm riding along, everything's good. Okay, I feel like I have this, I've ridden around, my instructor believes I'm doing well. Next step, you slowly shimmy your back foot to around these hatches. And what that's going to do is, my weight is still forward. You explain to your student, your weight is still forward, but I can now just shift my weight, and you barely even saw it, didn't you? It's very minimal, but just a little shift, that board's going to release. When it releases and starts to fly, I instantly go forward. I tell my customer, go forward, my student, go forward. And the reason why is, you want to make sure they just fly for a second, put the nose down, then they can go and do it again, always in a straight line. And that's it. That would be your touch and goes. So your touch and goes come from weights forward, I slowly shift my weight back, go up, the second it goes up, I go forward. Now if anything goes wrong, obviously you want to make sure your student knows he lets go of the throttle, bails. He never tries to save it. You never try to, I got this, I can pull this off. Never. You want to make sure they bail. Their hand's always off that trigger every time they fall off. Very important. So those would be your touch and goes. Then with time, they'll get longer and longer touch and goes. That's when they're ready to rock and roll. We want to keep our equipment as good as possible, one, for your, longevity of your lessons. Very important to use your bags, use your covers, always keep your boards, rinsed. Make sure to keep your batteries out of the sun, keep your remotes out of the sun. Before I do a lesson, I want to make sure I have a backup remote, I have charged batteries, I've gone through my units, I've checked my Allens, make sure everything's nice and tight. You always expect your equipment before a lesson, make sure you're ready to go, make sure everything's charged. Another big one is the hatch. The hatch should never pass 90 degrees. When you are going to, maybe they fall off their board, you're going to go retrieve their board for them. So you're going to ride on your board over, you grab their board. Very important, when they're jumping on their board or they're loading, getting onto their board, that you're not facing them directly. What I mean is this: if I'm facing them like this and he climbs on and he accidentally hits this trigger, this thing can launch at me. So you always want to kind of come up on him on a side just to be safe, because after the first few, they'll have this backwards. But every once in a while you can have them come in and grab the board when they get on and hit that trigger. So just something to look out for to be as safe as possible. Get as constant as you can with this trigger. Get them to ride at a steady speed, match your speed. I always say to my student, match my speed, match my speed, match my speed. Get them up to that proper speed and let them match it. Let them figure it out. Now I can tell you their speed always changes when they try something new, like going to knees or to standing up. But just get them to be very steady with this trigger. It's gonna make your world a lot easier. You don't want people to learn balancing or trying to make the foil work with the throttle. At the very beginning, you want them to do it with their balance of their body, shifting of their hips. You don't want them to do it with the throttle. It's more efficient and easier to just get them nice and solid with the trigger, and that's it. During the lesson, a very important tip is get them to plane. When that board is like this, it is pushing. You want to get it to where that board planes. That's where your lessons start. What I mean by that is they're going to start laying down, learn what planing is. When you're teaching your customer, we always recommend you dealing with the units. You carry the units to the water. You do everything for them. The least amount of work for them, one, keeps it safer, two, keeps them from maybe having an issue. A lot of people want to kick or bump into the units, and those are the littlest things that you just want to really avoid. So the more you can do to help the customer is obviously the best. Here's one way you can carry a unit, nice and simple. When it comes to the remote, just so you know, the first lightning bolt is 50% battery power. The second lightning bolt is 75% of the battery power, and the third lightning bolt would be for the pros or people that just want to have a really twitchy trigger. That's 100% of the battery. You know, if you have a guy who's pushing 200, maybe he's over 200, 250, obviously you're going to want to be on a 5.6 or bigger. Very important there. He can ride smaller, but he's just going to have to use a lot more power to get up. Saying that, you may have to go to level 2 or the second lightning bolt to give him a little more grunt to get him up. But most of the time, 99% of the time, you can teach on level 1 with anybody. But I would say if they're pushing 220, 250, you're definitely going to be wanting to go to level 2. You definitely don't need level 3. Level 3 is just 100% of the battery power, and there's so much battery power in these units that I'll let you find that out. Another very important point to add is when you are doing a lesson, if the person is a big guy, and they sink that front of the nose. Inside this nose, there is an antenna, the Bluetooth antenna that runs the Bluetooth from the remote to the board. When you sink this board, the nose of this board, it'll lose connection with the remote, which means a lot of big people who get on smaller boards, they sink the nose and they go, hey, the remote's not working, it's not connected. Well, they're usually sinking the front of the board. They're usually underwater. So you got to make sure that nose is up, you get them going, and then you get it planing and they're on top of the surface. So just so you know, if you have that issue where somebody is bigger, they're sinking the nose and they're saying, hey, I'm losing connection, just know that antenna runs right up to the front of the board, and that is just something that is helpful little knowledge for you. Size. So if I get a really small girl who weighs, we'll call it 110 pounds, she doesn't need to be on a 5.6 and a 250 wing. That is a big board with a lot of lift, which means she can go at a really slow speed and actually get lift, which makes it kind of tricky because if she gets going really slow, she can get into a stall and tilt and crash. So ideally, I recommend if you weigh, say, under 130, I would highly recommend that that person is on a 5.0 with a 170 wing. It's a really good setup for somebody that's a little bit lighter. As you get bigger, I recommend the 200 or the 250 wing. And on the 5.6 or 6.2 or any size boards that are bigger, it mainly comes down to somebody who's really small. You want to make sure they're on a smaller board. It keeps it safe. There's no rush to get them to Efoil. Look, if they have to come back and take 20 lessons, that's great. It's better for you, obviously. But I promise you, people learn faster than they probably should. So really take it slow. This thing can bite you fast. You want to make sure you're proactive in taking them step by step. Don't ever hesitate to put them back down to their knees or put them laying down. Your customer is always first. Safety is always first. If they start smarting back at you, don't hesitate to say, hey, look, buddy, it's time, you know, we go to the beach and maybe I'll just give you your money back and hit the road. We're all about safety here with Lift, and we want to make sure we give our customer and our student the greatest experience ever. So that is our goal. They'll keep coming back to you. They're going to buy everything from you if you give them that great experience, and that's why we signed you up as an affiliate. We believe in you. So I think we talked enough about a lot of these safety things. It's time to go hit the water, so I look forward to seeing you on the water, and we just want to say thank you for being a part of the family.